Dear colleagues, dear guests, dear hostess, it's my great pleasure and simultaneously very simple task to introduce Victoria Georgievna Lysenko. And it's easy because she is well known in Russian science and here as well. She is a head of big department of Oriental philosophy in Institute of Philosophy, Russian Academy of Science, and she is author of hundreds of scientific articles and additionally 7 books. And she also made a great job with translation of Buddhist texts related to perception in Russian.
Dignaga Dharmakirti Vasubandhu. Dignaga Dharmakirti Vasubandhu Shantarakshita.
Musum kolem ran lejaya budu. Lejane tsu gyurche. Dignaga. Now, dan chura. And now, Dharmakirti. Dharmakirti che. Now, Shantarakshita. Vasubandhu. Now,
and also I have to admit her a very big organizational activity to introduce Indian and Buddhist philosophy in our country and organize meetings related to these problems and our meetings also. And I personally am very grateful to her because I am here partly because of her activity. And with all these words, I give you ask to start your report.
Thank you very much for your kind introduction. Do you hear me well, Your Holiness? You hear me well?
thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Your Holiness, dear presenters, dear colleagues, dear friends, I would like to talk about a very difficult subject because for the moment we don't have any common language between us. And I refer to some good friend of His Holiness, Michel Bitbol, who said...
French, mind and life.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Yes, who said last December at the Emory Tibet conference that the philosophy can be a bridge between science and Buddhism, or Buddhism and science. In fact, he meant the new philosophy of science, which could introduce in itself some Buddhist ideas, incorporate some Buddhist ideas. So, in this paper, I will develop Michel Bitbol's ideas by suggesting that this bridge, philosophy bridge, can be constructed neither on Western nor on Buddhist traditional philosophical bearing structures, taken separately. The new philosophy of science requires a philosophical discourse of a new type, which is developing, taking its form right now, before our eyes. Some different appellations were given to it. Sometimes it is called global philosophy. Sometimes it is called cosmopolitan philosophy. Sometimes it is called intercultural philosophy, or even fusion philosophy, like fusion kitchen.
Philosophy nubjoge charging the membership ya nangborang charging the membership the yisung rek fusions labjogalta segri sharjo da jaga da jana khala te demand bachi the juku user islam the fusions it.
Okay, I prefer the term intercultural philosophy But as a mode of functioning of intercultural philosophy, I prefer the mode of kitchen in which ingredients of different culinary traditions are mixed up. Why intercultural?
There's a Tibetan saying about too much mixture leads to something that nobody can enjoy. Talking about food.
Yes, so it should be a good proportion of the different tastes. So intercultural philosophy differs from already existing comparative philosophy. I think that intercultural philosophy is a product of the 20th century, of the process of globalization. And it is different from comparative philosophy in two respects. First, because it also uses comparison between different traditions, but it is not given a key value to it.
And the fusion philosophy, the comparative philosophy, the fusion the test dogmaris, Jidan compare Cheba, Pension Druba Kanshi Gilia, Duria the Kachim Buzigio Maris, Dura di Tone, Yago, some Sabach in age, Tumong, Talam Sabach in age.
And it also overpasses the 20th century's idea of intercultural dialogue. It overpasses because in this dialogue, East remains East, West remains West. But intercultural philosophy is some mixture of both. You, Your Holiness, already know some persons who incorporate in their discourse this kind of intercultural philosophy, like J. Garfield, like John Donne, like Michel Bidball. There are some Indian people who also incorporate this idea, like Arindam Chakrabarti, Bimal Krishna Matilal, Jitendranath Mohanty. What is specific about intercultural philosophy as compared with comparative philosophy? Intercultural philosophy presupposes multicultural education. It is a question of multicultural education and experiences. These people had multicultural education. For example, they got traditional Indian training and as well as Western education. So they're capable to reflect, to think in terms of both traditions. And this is a phenomena of the 21st century. I think that it is the development of multicultural education that enables the development of intercultural philosophy. But it has to avoid two extremes. A rash universalism, which is, in my opinion,
universalism. Morangati Tani Yogutus, intercultural philosophy, rash universalism now.
So, namely, universalism is always based on only one philosophical tradition, the Western one. There is another extreme of dogmatic particularism. That means that the people who profess this kind of approach, they think that cultures are incompatible. So we cannot understand a culture which is beyond our cultural experience. We don't have instruments to understand other cultures. What is at stake here is a possibility of a person or a group of persons or society to keep intact their own cultural identity while accepting other cultural experiences. I propose in what follows to introduce to you those Russian thinkers and Buddhologists who, from my point of view, exemplified in their works an interesting modes of intercultural philosophizing. Those are Fyodor Stcherbatsky. You perhaps heard of his name. Stcherbatsky. Yeah, he is the author of Buddhist Logic. Then his disciple Oton Rosenberg. Maybe you not know him, but he died very early at the age of 31. But he has contributed with extraordinary, insightful work on Buddhist Abhidharma. And the third person is our contemporary, Alexander Piatigorsky, who passed away in 2009, who also was a very insightful and interesting thinker in terms of both Western and Buddhist traditions. So I will start with Stcherbatsky. I just give you his portrait. You may see how he did look like. He was a gentleman, yes. What is the most important things to emphasize here is that he received very good linguistic and philological training at St. Petersburg University and then in the West. But he became interested in philosophy. And the contributions of him I will summarize a little bit later, but I have to say that his life was very, very tragic after the well-known events which happened in the 30s under the Stalin regime. He has created a school. Almost all of his disciples were repressed. Some of them were sent to the concentration camp, and some of them were shot dead in the prisons of KGB. So he died during the Second World War, and he was very, very unhappy. To make a long story short, I just mentioned some of his most important contributions. He was the first among his fellow European Indologists and Buddhologists who acknowledged the existence of an original Buddhist philosophy in its own right. He also believed that the role of philosophy was of crucial importance in Buddhism itself, which was not a banal idea during his lifetime. He was a pioneer of comparative philosophy in the field of Buddhist Western comparisons. And the third point, which I'm going to develop, he was a precursor of intercultural philosophy, which I will develop in detail. So why he became interested in Buddhist philosophy? Because he was fond of Neo-Kantian philosophy and attended the lecture of a famous Neo-Kantian philosopher, Vvedensky. It is to him that he presented the first volume of his revolutionary study and translation of Dharmakirti's Nyaya Bindu, the Dharmottara commentary, entitled Theory of Knowledge. So this was the first Buddhist text epistemological and logical texts ever translated into any European language. But Vvedensky, did not appreciate. After reading this book, he was not interested in the subject of the book, and Stcherbatsky bitterly remarked in the second volume of this book, all these texts concerns the reaction of Vvedensky. While the hope expressed in the first part of the system of Dharmakirti should cause the interest not only among the small circle of Indologists, but among historians, the hope expressed, historian philosophy in general, it is still not fulfilled. However, nothing has appeared that would have shaken our confidence in its value. Superficial judgments shot from the hip of persons who did not prove their opinions by a careful study or by thinking through Buddhist teachings. Or even by a simple acquaintance with the subject, of course, are not the least to shake our confidence. But I may say that, unfortunately, this is a major reaction among my colleagues, among our scholars as well. So, we have to express a confidence and an optimism in this task, the same optimism that was characteristic for Stcherbatsky. Though all his efforts to arouse interest in Buddhism among Western philosophers was not successful, this intercultural dialogue continued in his own thinking. Russian sinologist Vasily Alexeyev found a brilliant formulation for this. He said that he is one who firmly holds in himself two worlds together. It is a very good formulation for any of intercultural philosopher. Stcherbatsky sometimes expresses skeptical attitudes and even criticism towards certain comparisons and rapprochements between Buddhism and Western philosophy, especially for Schopenhauer comparisons. But at the same volume, he rendered at the same volume, he translated some Buddhist terms by Kantian terminology, by terminology of Kant. So, was it an inconsistency in his method, or was it something else? I think that it was something else. First, it was upaya kaushalya, skillful means, to attract their attention of Russian neo-Kantian philosophers. And second, it was this kind of intercultural philosophy that I'm talking about. It was an effort, first example of intercultural philosophy. Because he also translated into Sanskrit some statements of Western philosophers, like Bergson. What was his method? He formulated as follows: we generally tried, where possible, to penetrate into the thought of the author in its entirety and to express it in Russian as it would be expressed by the author himself if he could have written in that language. This was his method of translation.
Benach Bandachurata, Russian came by and Russian Tola Candestine. The God Nagres, this some not Lola Keche, and Russian Yurbekalaya.
As if Dharmakirti, if he speaks Russian, how he could express these ideas. This was his method. But the most spectacular example of intercultural philosophy was his Indo-European Symposium on the reality of the external world, which was presented in his Buddhist Logic, Volume 1. Just have a look who were participants of this symposium. Dharmakirti Vasubandhu Nagarjuna Chandrakirti, Indian philosophers of Sankhya, Nyaya-Vaisheshika, Mimamsa from Indian side, and as well as Heraclitus, Parmenides, Democritus, etc., etc. These people discussed the problem of existence of external world. What makes this kind of intercultural philosophy of Stcherbatsky possible? He refers to a now forgotten German philosopher Willy Freytag, who said that it is neither accident nor arbitrariness determine the development of philosophy, but the eternal law of human nature and philosophical issues it solves. Under the most different conditions, philosophical thinking leads to the same result. Okay? By this declaration, he expressed his universalist stance, the belief that human mind in different conditions and in different forms continually raises the same questions and reveals the same truths. For him, this element of permanent philosophical mind, perennial philosophy, or eternal philosophy, was not particular ideas, but particular problems. Problems and questions, like relationship between mind and senses, the reality of empirical world, existence of other minds, etc., etc. Underlying this conception of intercultural philosophy is a special concept of language. He regarded language as a mere instrument of expression of thought, instrument which is transparent, which has its own consistency, which has its own nature. So for him, the languages are easily interchangeable. So we can express the same ideas in different ways, in different languages, and it will be the same ideas. Language does not affect the idea, in his opinion. Now we know that it is more complicated matter. Language has its own consistency. And it is his disciple, Anton Rosenberg, who pay attention to this aspect of intercultural philosophy. I suggested you to look at this face, at this person. Till recently, we didn't know how he did look like. Nothing preserved, no portrait, no photo of him preserved in the archives. Accidentally, one of our colleagues have found this photo in the public library of St. Petersburg. Before, we just didn't have an idea how he did look like, this great scholar. He was a disciple of Stcherbatsky, and he has passed 4 years in Japan. in monasteries, and he converted into Buddhism, and he studied the meditational techniques from inside. So he became convinced that it is very important not only to study texts, but to experience what is described in these texts. But it was not only the penetration into other culture and becoming the same as the bearers of our culture. It was a very deliberated method, which was based on 2 rules. First rule is to experience at each occurrence exactly that change of association with which this or that phenomenon, he meant idea or meditative experience, is connected. The original association of ideas of that tradition. The second rule is to prevent the emergence of European associations. He compared the researcher. He didn't think that the researcher should reject his own culture, but he compared the researcher with an actor who, while playing the role of saint or a criminal, does not become either one or the other. In other words, he tries to analyze Buddhist philosophical doctrines not in the usual European framework, but from within the Buddhist tradition, basing oneself. He is mostly interested not in what was common to Buddhism and Western thought, but in what was specific for Buddhism, what constitutes the otherness of Buddhism. He believes that only after studying Buddhism from inside, in all its otherness, that we can start to compare Buddhism with the Western thought. Unlike Stcherbatsky, who believed that we should translate all the terms in the Buddhist text, he believed that to prevent the wrong associations, we should not translate all the terms. We should leave some terms untranslated, because when we translate them, they provoke the wrong associations, like, for example, the translation that existed in his time of dharma as a law and nirvana as salvation. Now we use another terms for translating nirvana, which have no this association with Christian soteriology as the term salvation is.
The Quran Chebena Danade Stcherbatsky sometime Sharjoguti Dagadri Tuki and the Tanya Tama Jina Russian Kena to Jurgu some to yours. Then the Quran Gidu the Jena Mare Tanya Gashi Jurgi Debele Quran Moma Quranshana agrees. And the Jurben to do than the Nandelia salvation lagor salvations lab the goal Chilon and Chico Kunjoji Jugu and number Shukshin Biores. There's a call not take it.
So we will pass to the third hero of my presentation, Alexander Piatigorsky. He wrote about the dominant, I'll say some words about him. His teacher was Yuri Rerich, the famous Buddhist scholar, one of his teachers. Other teacher was Malala Sekera, Tibetan, the scholar from Sri Lanka, who was then the ambassador of Sri Lanka in the Soviet Union. Who he studied Tibetan with Rerich, and he studied Pali with Malala Sekera. And he knew also Tamil language and many other languages as well. So he emigrated from Russia in 1974, and then he became the professor of London University, where he had many students who adored him because he was an extravagant person, and his lectures attracted a lot of public. He never consulted any notes, and he was moving all the time with his pipe and throwing provocative phrases. And I met many young scholars who attended his lectures, and they said to me, "We miss him so much. He was our close friend. He was the only person with whom we could talk freely." And he was really an incarnation of freedom of thought. He wrote about the dominant approach to Buddhist philosophy. These words, "The first and still dominant tendency is to describe this Buddhist philosophy in the same way as the ancient authors could have expressed it if they knew the language of the Indo-European philosophical tradition established between 17th and 19th century." It is the principle of translation of Stcherbatsky, as we have seen. So it concerns his method. May I proceed?
Sure.
Proceed. His own approach. The second, and so far only beginning trend, I would associate with the attempt of the researcher of Buddhism first to reflect his philosophical position in terms of Buddhist philosophy. He called to this approach Buddhistic, not Buddhist. Buddhistic is a new word in Russian, Buddhistic philosophy. So he is Buddhistic philosopher, and he was making Buddhistic philosophy. And then to describe the latter, your philosophy, as a particular case of some general, timeless, and specially uncertain philosophy, of which my philosophy will be another special case. So he is talking about perennial philosophy or eternal philosophy. After all, on the other hand, the purity of the methodological approach requires that when you talk about any of non-yours philosophy, about any that has become known to you, if you are getting familiar with any philosophy, it is indispensable, first of all, to proceed from what this philosophy says about itself in the texts. It was principle of Rosenberg, whether spoken or written, from how it formulates itself. But on the other hand, the completeness of the methodological approach requires that at the same time you reflect your own language, your own thinking, your own intellectual perception of the text of the philosophy under examination. It is the reflection of your own language. It should not be the language which do not correspond to the material you're analyzing. I would like to say one more very important thing. Piatigorsky's main passion in his life were interesting talks. The word interesting was the clue, the key word for him. So he was always engaged in a conversation with interesting people about interesting things. And his thinking is sometimes very provocative and challenging. I would like to give some example of his general ideas, because I do not have time to go into details, but I assure you that the details are very, very interesting and also provocative. So he was convinced that Buddhist philosophy is yogic philosophy par excellence. So it's primarily yogic philosophy or meditative philosophy. Philosophy of yogins and ascetics. In general, what we now call Buddhist philosophy is a set of concepts, postulates, and definitions which were either invented at the exit from contemplation or were objects of contemplation, or both. One of the consequences of this is, for example, the absence in the Buddhist philosophy of such a banal opposition as practice-theory. For practice here is understood as primarily the practice of contemplation, and the theory actually constitutes one with the highest knowledge or wisdom. He also emphasized that yogins, ascetics, and meditators are a special kind of human beings. Why? Because their consciousness is essentially transformed by contemplative practices and yoga. It grasps the world differently from our ordinary consciousness, and therefore their thinking has a different cognitive structure. Buddhist contemplative practices cultivate not natural states of mind. For example, the practice of mindfulness, smrti, which he called reverse remembering. I give you but one example. The smrti, sati, or vipassana, as we call it, this practice, the reverse remembering is not a spontaneous, but an artificial, consciously elaborated state of consciousness, in which all the mental activity of the yogi is concentrated in a retrospective effort to fix the thought on the object of the preceding thought. In this state, all the functions and modalities of the mind are reduced to the fulfillment of this task.
Tres these are number ki kanda chi zedun chesa ki joje tu mangche yana gom jabe shulia nyong la cheba chita yana gom me gol shan cheba che nya chagyores dinalo la tablam de ya ne kanda chi lo jangje temanya sha de ya de to no yongdos temba se de ngaranju rangche so yobe temple ke she yo mares tembe ze dun je ngar ke nyong da kelenda de su temba che reverse remembering those
even more, the naturalizing mind is the dhyana practice. He believed he believed that the Buddhist concept of dharmas, momentariness, kshanikavada, and many other ideas were dhyanic ideas. So only the mind in the enlightened mind, which have passed through the 9 or 8 dhyanas, 4 classical dhyanas and samapati, objectless dhyanas, can grasp the nature of mind and the nature of mind functioning. So the dharmas are dhyanic ideas. And here he refers to and what is very, very important, this corresponds with the Buddhist ideas of two truths. Empirical truth, ordinary truth, and absolute truth. And he believed that empirical truth, could be understood only from the point of the absolute truth. only after passing.
대니기 남샤시에제 네 다녀 덴베니즈 터두디 돈남 덴베니즈 현자의 쇼골 마도 현도 말았어.
And well,
단다 지부디기 미디게 시고르게 마미디기.
Unfortunately, I don't have time to read to you, but I will make my conclusion. Okay, I will pass to my conclusion. We all know that many Western scientists, Russian included, are very interested in investigating Buddhist meditators. But how could they explain these states if all their theories are based on the studies of a normal mind? How could they explain meditating mind if they ignore completely the Buddhist theories about mind? I am sure that the Buddhist theories of mind are much more developed. Buddhist theories of consciousness is much more classified, developed. And these developments are not abstract construction. They are connected with the practice. And I think that the only way for our Western scholars to understand the meditating mind is to study Buddhist theories of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful.
Thank you for your presentation. Your Holiness, do you want to comment or have some opinions?
다 지용부터 하네. 산재의 최근으로 단디 실을 근제지로 데이터네 에네 로정야지도 생겨래. 저들이 인도산에 대전을 쳐이나 신업은 내수스. 다 시내수 대더 되네. 엔다 지금 로야 가장 것도 동해면 되거든 대원돼 봐. 두지고가 말해. 가게가 말 랑한 게 동해면 되거든 대원돼 봐래. 동해도 대화사지 랑한 게 예지 버다. 산다 디두사 조조의 sem을 투den의 차이도 전에 그 이루 때문에 되네. 루시지고 매체. 때때니 인도산에 아니 이루리야다 교도야지. 때때니 자기 제가 출루 망셔디디 신내들 항도 시기하래. 단직점에 항도 제대로 가다 시라샤 인도산에 섬근남샤디 정수 통도. 말람 되고 주고 매체. 가다 섬을 정다치야지. 신라가 나면 치야지. 근데 인도산에 섬근남샤디 몽고치 정수 통용 거지. 배절하셔. 자, 다들 얘네 나가는 신고 시내수 시인도산에 얘네 친구랑 가버리고 낭섬 가버리고 디디 시내수 시기하러 다 디디 통용 거래. 다 아다가도 세르고인도 계셔야 돼. 시내수 시기하러 마도 남근에서 시기하러 말해. 레빈에서 돼야잖아요.
So one thing that I would like to share with you is the basic Buddhist approach when it comes to
I think mainly a Sanskrit tradition.
the Indian
Pali
Sanskrit.
tradition is a foundation of Buddha Dharma. But most cases just take Buddha's quotation. For example, Four Noble Truths and the 37 practice mainly based on Buddha's quotation. Now Sanskrit tradition, so each point reasoning, investigate. Like one occasion, I had opportunity discussing about Four Noble Truths and the 37 practice with some scholars and also including some Buddhist monk from Buddhist University in Bangkok. Many years ago I have been. So a few years ago, you see some group of people from there, we met and we discuss. Yes, the common practice, common sort of the
Concepts, Lama.
concept. And then I ask you these sort of the concept based on quotation or reasoning. Then they say quotation. Then immediately I felt the Dharmakirti's second chapter. All these points, same point, but use extensively reason. So the Nalanda tradition, Sanskrit tradition. So even Buddha's own teaching, some text, if it goes wrong with reason, then we reject. So Nalanda tradition, we Tibetan, the 8th century, although Buddhism, I think, found in Tibet in 7th century, mainly through marriage with Chinese princess. Then, even then, at that time, the Tibetan script, that Kashikasana, Shangshung Gmari Yori, the Yarja Dambari Sing Chikto. Rikashiklavna, any Tumi, South Service, the kind of mene, Kanda, Yigi, Jaga Yigilpetesha.
So Tibetan script, the current writing system, was invented in the 7th century. There are two opinions. The mainstream received view is that it was invented by Tomisam Bora, based on an Indian script. There is another opinion, which is that it was a development, further development and refinement of an existing indigenous Tibetan script, Pön. But whatever may be the case, it is evident that the original model that was used for the invention of the script is Indian.
So, Kakakanga, alphabet, Re, Yang the Seji.
So the alphabets, the consonants and the vowel system is very similar to the Indian writing system.
And Indian grammar as well.
Yeah.
Panini grammar.
Then, 8th century, another Tibetan emperor, Emperor Smrti.
Emperor.
So he himself, I think son, his mother, I think one Chinese princess, like that. But he, you see, prefer, as far as Buddha Dharma is concerned, he wanted to take directly from India. So he invited, I think the other day also I mentioned, the Chandarakshita invited. So Chandarakshita, philosopher, and also great logician. See, his writing now still available. We ourselves still study. So since he himself, a great logician,
Tattva Samgraha, Principles of Philosophy. It's a very difficult text.
I know. I translated the Piatigorsky chapter of this text.
And commentary by Kamalashila. He's both great logician. So, we Tibetan since 8th century. The Chandarakshita introduced Buddha Dharma according to Nalanda tradition. He himself great logician. So we carry, I think, his instruction, I think, very seriously, very sincerely. So now today, as far as Buddhist logic is concerned, the study and the knowledge available only in Tibetan tradition. No Chinese tradition.
Yes, of course.
Logic and epistemology.
So now, so
the point His Holiness was making is that in this Nalanda tradition that the Tibetans are custodians of, there is a great emphasis on cultivating the path or understanding that is based upon an exploration of the nature of reality. So there's an insistence on making sure that our understanding is grounded upon our understanding of the reality. And then, based upon this, of course, then the mental training component comes. And large part of that has to do with, because, for example, the fact that we all instinctively wish to be free from suffering. We all instinctively wish to be happy. That's a fact. Nobody has to argue for it. You don't need a proof of this fact. Similarly, the fact that we are driven by that kind of aspiration is again a fact of human existence, the sentient existence. But on the other hand, one thing that becomes clear is in the tradition there is an understanding that the mind plays a very important role in defining our experience of happiness and suffering. So therefore, a large focus is paid on understanding the mechanics of the mind and what methods there exist to somehow regulate it and apply it. So, and this is really, so therefore in the Buddhist tradition, distinction is drawn between ground, which is the understanding of reality as it is.
Absolute truth.
Yeah, and then the path is what comes on the basis of that, and then the result is what you attain through the cultivation of the path. So His Holiness was saying that when we have discussions with scientists, we're basically in this first domain, the domain of understanding the reality. Path don't come. Some aspects of it will come, but the path itself wouldn't come in the discourse. What comes in is the understanding of the reality.
So I think one difference is Western sort of culture. Of course, any culture of different place, I think quite important rule, religious sort of tradition. So science, as I mentioned yesterday, also I think, the science come from West. So these scientists, their sort of cultural background is Judeo-Christian background. So they just one life. Okay, no previous life like that. And then also you see very much emphasis faith, not investigation. Whereas India, not only Buddhism, but Jainism, and all other sort of non-Buddhist tradition in India, you see the practice of shamatha and the practice of vipassana. So the tradition where practice of shamatha and vipassana, naturally, automatically, more explanation about mind.
For example, these two primary types of meditation practice, one has to do with focused attention. The cultivation of tranquility is shamatha. The other one is more discursive, analytic, and it's characterized as the insight approach or practice. So when we, so His Holiness was saying that this is common to all the Buddhist traditions, all the Indian traditions, including Buddhism, where the tradition of cultivation of the mind and these meditative techniques are available, there is naturally going to be a lot more attention paid to the mechanics of the mind. Because if you are cultivating single-pointedness of attention, then you have to find out what are the main obstacles, what are the conditions that will promote it. All of this, what is the distinction between a gross kind of scattered mind versus more excited state, or mental sinking and laxity. So attention will be paid to the specifics of how mind works and what are the obstacles. So that's why there's a lot more explanations about the mental processes in the Indian texts.
So this morning our discussion, self. Over 3,000 years in this country, a lot of discussion about self. So Atma concept. And later Buddhism come, Anatma. So
No self. No self.
Oh, like that. So now, I think there is not much sort of reason to emphasize Western science or Buddhist science. I don't think. Science is science. I think we Asian, we happily accept science. We never consider science belongs to West. So some science, some knowledge which develop Asia, you should not consider this Asian sort of thinking, Asian thing. Should not think that way. Religion is something different. Buddhism belongs to Asia. So, Lama Namsha ta Asia the West love.
So when we are talking about the actual religious practice, then we can speak in terms of cultural specificity, Asians versus Western.
When we talk science, it's common. Most of the medicines, allopathic medicine come from West. We never say, oh, this is West, Western medicine. We don't touch. Foolish. Foolish. So similarly, you Westerner, including Russian, say, oh, this is Asian science. Wrong. Science is common. So in Asia, I think particularly in India, since they have practiced the shamatha and vipassana, so naturally more explanation about a system of emotion, system of mind. So certainly you can take. So
it's, one could almost look at it in terms of complementing certain worldview by bringing elements from other.
Sometimes I describe myself as a staunch Buddhist because the Arya Deve Shivjeve Shungda, any Lomin Lingdengi, any talking about this thing, the group you are. Jazaga, any Namji, Yorota, the Jitanko Buddhist is Jagida. Kasadimi just haven't. That's it. The check him do. Kanda, Tagore Jugu. Roya. Says, not even losers with Miservata. Just a stranger cherry.
Solnit was saying that he describes himself as a staunch Buddhist because he's someone who has been exposed thoroughly to the critiques of theism in important Indian Buddhist classics, such as, Dharmakirti's texts and, Bhavaviveka's Blaze of Reasoning and 400 stanzas on the middle way by Aryadeva. And many of these texts present very scathing, detailed critique of any notion of an eternal being that is the creator, supposed to be the creator of the universe. So he's someone who has been exposed to these arguments and reasoning.
But I consider, you see, these are different views according to different mental disposition. Is it to some people, is a certain sort of views more helpful? Okay. Buddha himself, you see, taught the different philosophical views. So I often used to telling people, the Buddha, same person, you see, taught different philosophy, contradictory.
Yes.
So that does not mean Buddha's own mind not very clear. His own view confused. So one day he taught something, next day he taught something. No, certainly not. No, he deliberately tried to create more confusion among his followers. No. So then answer is, different people, different mental disposition, so need different philosophical views.
Upaya kaushalya.
So there's a phrases in the Buddhist text talking about the importance of presenting your teaching in accordance with the different mental faculties and dispositions of the people.
So now, as a student of these great masters, masters sort of also teaching. If we really very much strict, my teaching, my tradition, then I think we have to reject science because come from West. No, certainly not. I learned many useful information from science. As a result of learning from scientists, one casualty is I no longer accept Mount Meru. So like that, you see, all these common things. We should not sort of make demarcation west, east. Should not do that, I feel. This is knowledge of human being. So, okay, thank you. Thank you. Oh. So now, as far as mind is concerned, ancient Indian sort of tradition, more information. So worthwhile to learn. Like atoms or these things, you see, that they find in the West. So we easily sort of learning these things. So this is something, knowledge of humanity, like that. That's my view. Then religious matter, then something different. I think some time back, of course, one Christian monk, wonderful monk, we often discuss about, you see, the single-pointed meditation or certain method to increase sense of forgiveness, tolerance, these things. And also, you see, we also discuss single-pointed meditation. This is common. Christian practitioners also need these things. So we discuss. One day, he asked me about shunyata, emptiness. Then I told him, don't ask that. Oh, that's Buddhist business, not your business. I really felt, you see, the concept of nothing absolute, independent, that concept may harm his single-pointed faith towards God. So I told him that. And then a few years ago, in Bangalore, one Hindu sadhu, wonderful person, he really helping immensely, providing meals to few thousand students. Wonderful. So one occasion he invited me, so we spent some time. And then I mentioned to him, the Hinduism and Buddhism is like twin brothers, sisters. We have common practice of shila.
Morality, ethical discipline.
Practice of shamatha, single-pointed mind. Practice of vipassana. You see, this is our common practice. Then I told him, concept of atma and anatma, that's private business. I believe anatma, you believe atma. So that's private business, no problem. So like that, there's certain sort of religious belief. And then those people who follow Judeo-Christian tradition, and Zoroastrian also, I think Muslim, most of the
Hindu
tradition which developed from or come from Middle East, all believe Creator. So that's their business. No use to argue that. And also to Asian sort of tradition. You see, no use to argue. You see, there is Atma or Anatma, these things. This, because of the Indian business.
Indian business.
Like that. So therefore, I think I really feel it's too much that the West and East is those community.
Sometimes I feel that people make too much of the cultural boundaries when it comes to ideas and knowledge.
When we discuss about size of nose, then we can say, oh, Westerner, big nose. African or Vietnamese, otherwise, you see, these basic sort of human feeling or human mind, same. That's my view. So this kind of discussion, I really feel very, very important. As I mentioned the other day, as a Buddhist monk, I learned many, many useful information from modern scientific finding or science. And similarly, many scientists find very useful information about mind. And particularly the method to train to tackle our destructive emotion. Many Westerners, many scientists now really are showing interest. So, meeting with modern scientists and ancient Indian Buddhist science, you see, through discussion, it's immense mutual benefit. Like that. In the early period, about 40 years ago, when I first, thinking seriously, dialogue with scientists, and some monk, some scholars, they have some reservation. But then time passes. Now they fully convinced. So we also now study science in our
monastery,
bigger monastery institution. And even, the Jugju Nalole, and it's changing subject to look.
In fact, the reform and introduction of science has been so kind of institutionalized that now it's part of the required examination at the more advanced level.
So like that. So I think in the West, I think if we say the science comes from West, the Judeo-Christian background, anyway, some influence there, but anyway, now more scientific sort of research, some religious people, a little bit uneasiness, like that. So that's my view. So I really very much enjoy our meeting, and I feel this should not be just one occasion. I think from time to time, this kind of meeting. Then also I want, when I have some sort of meeting with scientists from West mainly, I very much willing invite some Russian scientists, join. As the same group, should not make distinction or wall, West and East, should not do that.
I'm not doing that. Never. On the contrary.
So sometimes in our mind, we all criticize Berlin Wall. So sometimes mentally, some kind of wall, that is not good. And particularly at the time, one of my commitment is promotion of sense of oneness of 7 billion human beings. So we should not sort of make too much sort of distinction. Oh, we and they, and we and they. That's not good. Thank you.
Thank you. Your Holiness,
No.
Yes, we ask you.
No need formality.
We ask you.
I don't like formality.
We ask you to make some concluding remarks, but maybe we can consider your words as concluding remarks.
That's awesome.
Yes. Then we ask you to accept this paper, which we prepared on the basis of our consideration, It's our proposition, our ideas about possible ways of cooperation.
직중가도.
다른 마음발이야 단 냠룹 그 내가 제게 밑에 저시를 제베나스.
Idea of future research such as situation.
Buddhist practices and conflict resolution technology. 들으시던데 파우스 미팅받는 중반에 대세야가 탑시엘 탑람이야 나중에.
I know.
Advanced learning efficacy and creativity.
As we're coming to the conclusion, I would like to first of all express our gratitude.
And lobjong miselabiela, lobjong kumalabial tablet. That which durudan zamdangmero. Then Buddhist practices and performance under cognitive load. Pena jigmezo nezumang bushu chedo loma yi much deje but deje nelian to go doyan tapshi karunas. And pro-social behaviors labjo golta sambujo batitre nyingji tabzu yarjeta nambe labjo de karunas. Comparative studies the techniques that result from first person that me gerge no job seri tadan de chiwona so tadan derwa. Then gerge nyamnyong ton tadan gtone ya lo jaya tapshi da. And then consciousness theory gala. This an influence of genetic, the epigenetic. Epigenetics lab the gene ki namju tandang call. Chi gang tone. The Zuya tone psychotherapy now tablam sabat the karaki and us.
Do. Came to the way.
Came into the Tamil Yamudu.
Talk.
I think okay.
Yeah, good suggestions. Yeah. Sure.
So, as we are concluding, first of all, I would just like to inform what the procedure is going to be. His Holiness has already given his closing remarks. On behalf of our Russian delegation, I would like to express our gratitude to His Holiness for granting us his precious time and rescheduling. I know it was initially to be held in Dharamsala, then it got shifted to Ladakh, and because of our request, it was shifted to Delhi. I know it's not easy to reschedule, so I first of all would like to express our gratitude to His Holiness as well as His Holiness the Dalai Lama's office for making and adjusting to all the changes. So by tradition, His Holiness will offer a scarf to the main presenters. Then we will take a group photo session with the presenters only. Then the monks will join the presenters in the photo. That's photo number 2. Then the last photo where everybody will join in the group. So this will be our historical picture. So by tradition of the Russian culture, it is important to say a closing words and offer a gift. So I would like to pass the floor to Professor Tatiana to say the final words. Thank you.
So we are extremely grateful. Of course, we knew what we face, but it was larger and deeper. And what is most important, at least I think all of us, we felt huge energy and warmth. We knew that we would meet intellectual depth, of course, but I never thought I would feel what I felt. So we are extremely grateful.
That I think I hypnotized you. So now it seems successful.
So, and of course, we are grateful for all the monks because we saw your faces and we met your eyes and we saw your smiles. So that energy was with us.
Right.
It's absolutely true, ultimate truth.
Thank you.
So, and we want to give you a gift. I wanted to say a small gift, but it is not small. It's it is called Holy Russia, and it's an album from prepared by the by Russian Museum in St. Petersburg, and these are icons and their descriptions, and it's one of the best collections of this kind. So we'd be happy if you accept it.
Thank you. I very much appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
about global crisis.